Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Meta Breakers episode. I'm JP, hosting as per usual. I'm joined by Phil.
Hi guys, Phil talking crap.
And today we are talking at least a different kind of crap, which is a little bit off the actual game itself, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Games Workshop's decision to lock up the new Warscrolls coming out with the new battle tomes, new battle tome rules on the app. So yeah, so it's going to be a bit maybe a bit more rambling than you're used to, but hopefully you'll enjoy that. But yeah, let's just get right into it. Basically, for people who don't know, for a long time the rules in Age of Sigmar were all available on the Age of Sigmar app, and Games Workshop have decided for new rules coming out that each army coming out, so we got this picture of Skaven, is going to be locked behind a paywall on a per battle tome basis. So that's sort of what we're going to be talking about. And where we will start is way back in the past. Not sure how many of you are going to know about this, but in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So I know you also played Fantasy Battle probably more than I did, Phil. But when I started playing, none of the rules were allowed to be posted on the internet. And sort of I'd come into it from a video game sort of background, so I was very used to being like, okay, let me read up what's the best build for, but it was very much like, I mean, forums, this is just all sorts of internet history lesson, but it was like the main way people talked about stuff was on forums rather than on like Discord or WhatsApp. And these forums would be like, you can't post screenshots of rules or how many points things cost or anything like that, or like Games Workshop's lawyers will come after us and we'll have to close the forum. So I know that was true. Was that also was that your experience? Were you ever on Lustria Online like I was, Phil, back in Fantasy Battle?
It was very much, yeah. If you didn't know someone with the battle tome, you could forget it, and I think when AOS first came out, people would get all sorts of people trying to dodge things in certain ways. I think we talked in the warm up for this chat to kind of go, someone would go, it's 50 Skaven slaves with the points, and because everyone knew the Skaven slave points balance was 2 points a Skaven slave, so you ended with all sorts of weird and wonderful descriptions, which if you didn't know what was going on, you were just looking at it kind of blowing your mind. But yeah, it was a different time for GW as well. I think they were a lot more lawyer heavy back then. They would just come after everybody for everything. And it was in the days of before all the name changes as well, wasn't it? So you actually had elves and orcs and rather than orcs and elves and all the rest of it. So it was a very, very different time. But yeah, no, you couldn't post anything. Like I say, screenshots taken down straight away. And like I say, you would only even talk so far about the rules just in case you infringed and find yourself forum banned for 5 days and not talking to anybody. So yeah, that was very much kind of a nanny state situation going on, to be fair, that we haven't had quite some time, to be honest. That was since they launched the app. Was AOS 2 they launched the app, or was AOS 3? I can't remember. But around that time, everything's been on there and visible.
Yeah, and even AOS 1, it was all like online and available from Games Workshop. I mean, when AOS first launched, it was the 4 pages of rules that is just exactly, just 4 PDFs, and that was that was back in the days when there was stuff that could teleport straight into combat, and I mean all sorts. It was a wild west out there.
They thought it was all going to crash and burn, and they'd be a 40k only company, and then they realised it was cash in fantasy. any type of fantasy,
except for that poor one guy who burnt his 10,000 points of high elves. That was
still famous.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to him. He probably secured his place in history by doing that. But anyways, fast forward to 2024, and I don't think I don't think anyone had any forewarning of it, but AS4 comes out. We've got the rules in the GHB. Everyone's looking at their new Warscrolls for the new edition and all that. And then when the new Skaven book came out, and I presume for the rest of the battle tomes that will be coming out to update each faction, you can't look at the rules for the Warscrolls in the app unless you've bought specifically the Skaven battle tome. So
it's interesting, isn't it, that to show, I guess, to show the split of players currently in GW, to be fair, because they changed this model in 10th edition 40k about 18 months ago. So you're right, from an AOS player point of view, kind of completely blindsided, because we've been spoilt with an extra 18 months of kind of free rules, free Warscrolls, all that. It was only when we got talking about it, and when the Skaven tome was coming out, I was like, oh, I do have the 40k app, and if I go on and look, I can't get anything on the 40k either. But I never really considered it. Cause like as you know, we only play 40k casually occasionally, don't we, for fun. So I've got my one battle tome that is the race I play, and I never really thought about looking at any of the rest because if I'm going and meeting someone to play, they've got their rules, right? So so I guess they've taken the chance in fourth to align AOS with 40k. So it is a model, the business that that they've moved to over the last couple of years. But yeah, it's a shake up to AOS. I think I was playing for the first time the other night and playing against New Skaven. Yeah, it was very strange when my opponent went and just checked the word, and I was like, I literally can't. I haven't bought my battle tome yet, so I hadn't got around to buying it, and therefore I'm like, well, you're gonna have to just show me your app because I can't.
There's no other way. Yeah. So yeah, I'll let you go first. What would you say your initial impressions are? Obviously we play a reasonable, I would say, mix of wargaming. We go to tournaments, we play competitive games. You play at a gaming club. I will occasionally play just friendly games and all that. So what's your initial impressions?
So my initial thoughts, I guess twofold really. So I think from a positive perspective, if I take it that way, as to why I think GW have done it, I think that they've had to decide what they give away for free, right? So as players, we all want as much stuff for free as possible because what keeps the world going round, right, and makes our lives easier as players, etc. And there's lots of companies out there we'll come on to that do free rules and stuff like that. And I think what route they've gone down is going, right, well, what we'll do is we'll give you all the points for nothing. So if you're thinking about buying a new army, you can see the points. If you know you want to play 3,000 points, you can see the points. You can have a rough idea of what you're going to buy from points. And then we assume as GW that you will buy your battle tome as part of buying your army, and therefore once you do that, you can find out what the stuff does. So I think they've gone down that route rather than locking down the points and giving it the Warscrolls. So that's what I think they would see their positive as. I think from a negative perspective, from their perspective, not just from our perspective as players, because I think that's we all get quite blinkered, right, in terms of what suits us, what's right at the time, and obviously we all have an awareness and bear in mind that GW need to make money. That's what those wouldn't be here for us.
No, they just give us all the minis for free, 24/7.
Very kind, charitable enterprise, right? But I think where they run the risk is, I think, as you say, from a tournament player point of view, or from a, we do different campaigns, different events, all that sort of thing. You would fire up the app to have a look at what you might do next. You would. I don't necessarily want to think, well, I might do this army next, but I know I've got to spend £40 on my battle tome, or 35 if it's a third party, whatever. I've got to do that just to unlock the Warscrolls to find out if I want to do the army. So now I'm spending money. I might then read the codex and go, actually, battle tome. Sorry, I might read the battle tome. wrong. I'll catch one systems. Read the battle tome and go, actually, I don't want to play that race. So now I've just spent £40 for nothing, right? I get the whole know your foe and all that is useful and kind of, I guess, is where from our perspective playing events, you're kind of going, well, I'm almost looking down the barrel of spending the 40 quid every time anyway now, because I want to know my opponent's armies, right? That's a key part of going to an event with videos for people to check that, yes, you want to know your own army inside and out, but you want to know roughly what your opposing army's doing so you know how to counter it. So I think from a negative perspective, I think it will impinge people's ability to collect more armies, which is something GW are looking for people to do. Obviously, Regiments of Renown system, which is obviously designed for people to buy more models, right? You buy some of every single army because you can chuck it into your main army and use it. But actually now you're going to have to buy every battle tome to use that Regiment of Renown to get all the stats for it. So it's going to make it tricky, and I think it's that's probably where I'm at with it, really. And I think it makes interaction on a gaming level more awkward. And I want to say awkward, I mean
more confrontational in a way.
Well, I think we all know, the hobby is amazing, but it does attract, people on a certain end of the sociological spectrum, right? So not always the most socially confident people, right? You might have tried in the past in a non-confrontational way. If you didn't think something sounded right, I'll fire up my phone, have a look, and you know what? If I'm wrong, it doesn't need to be a confrontation. I can just shut my phone down again. No, blah blah blah.
Doesn't slow down the game.
Right, exactly. If I'm right, I can just go, excuse me, actually, do you know it says this, this, and this? Whereas in this world, you're going to have that confrontation, whether you're right or wrong. So what that might lead to is obviously people shying away from having that conversation, because people, if people aren't confident, right, they might say, you know what, I'm not going to actually, I'm not putting myself out there. I'm not putting my head on the block. When I might be wrong. Now, that's a shame, because I think people should. We all want to have a fair game, right? We all, and you like to think that the number of people who would push the boundaries of a fair game is extremely limited, but they are out there, and I think it leans into that, doesn't it? Where people will feel under pressure not to question. In terms of, if your opponent, for example, is making out like you're running out of time at an event, so we're not checking again, are we? You might, oh yeah, don't worry about it, it's fine. You're right, we're running out of time. I bet let's just get on. And before you know it, actually they've used that to push and take advantage. And there's nothing worse, is there, when you're sat in the bar or sat outside afterwards and your mate says, you realize I couldn't do it.
You're like, I knew it. It is interesting, because I think also in some ways it'll change the nature of the confrontations a little bit, because before really we started having this conversation, I was sort of imagining, I would be there without the Skaven book, right? And my opponent's there with the Skaven book. But there's easily a situation where you go to an event and you're like, oh, are you sure your Rattling gun does 18 d6 shots? And they're like, yes, I'm sure. And you're like, well, I don't have the Skaven app. Can you show me? And they're like, I haven't bought it. It's a waste of money. And then you're like, oh. And they're like, so. And they're like, but trust me. Hashtag trust me. And whether they're, making it up or not, like, you don't even have to be so cynical as to say they're making it up. They might just be like, well, when I played my mate, who also doesn't have the book, he said it was 18 d6 shots, and so that's how I've always played it.
Well, you could even have it more innocent than that, right? If you've, and it will be interesting to see, and we've the other video's coming out soon, isn't it? But we've talked about kind of GW's mechanisms for game balance, and obviously the main one they've settled on is points, right? So you'd like to think there's going to be very few Warscroll changes in future, because they've settled on points being the mechanism. But they have changed Warscrolls in the past. They have amended Warscrolls in the past. Let's say that you have gone out and bought your Skaven book today, and that in 6 months' time something's massively broken. That Brood Terror is a rank 6-star. And it's breaking the game, and they changed the Warscroll, but you haven't got the app. So you turn up to your event and you go, well, I've got my book.
Yeah, it says
it does, and your opponent's going, hang on a minute, no, I read somewhere that's changed. You go, well, but I've got the book. I haven't got the app. I don't pay for the app. I've got the book. The book says this. And it becomes awkward, right? Because they're going to go, well, it's a bit like already now in the current day when people bring the cards to events, and you just kind of like, don't quote me something off the card that I know is wrong.
Yeah, that was wrong before it ever came out.
But I don't know about you, and I've played people in events who they only play in the local scene, and they're not necessarily technology literate, and they do use the cards. That is their Bible, and you kind of go, there's been an update, and they're just looking at you like, what do you mean there's been an update? I bought these cards, and you're like, well, the app's the Bible, right? So
it's an interesting, I think, really, like, where this stems from, it in some ways is a good place by GW, which is that we want more frequent balance updates. Like, I think everyone would, roughly speaking, agree that in an ideal world, you would go out, you would buy one of these nice battle tomes. I've always enjoyed the battle tomes I've bought. You'd buy that for your army, and you'd be like, cool, I'll get another one in 2 years from now. That's fine. But, like, at the same time, you're also like, I don't want my Brood Terror to be 350 points for 2 years. So, like, you also have to be like, okay, wait. Like, I need to accept that my book's going to be out of date. Now, as you've said, GW are mainly focusing on points, which I think, and they've taken the points out of the battle tomes. And so that is something. But, like we saw with Nighthaunt, just in the Battle Scroll Gone, it run and charge is now 1 unit only and stuff like that. So it's like, again, your book's out of date, and no one can check. And, you need to be reasonably online to even know those things exist. As you see, like, you could easily go to a tournament and someone's like, oh, I'm playing against Nighthaunt, and they're like, you have retreat and charge, and you're like, yeah, I do. Like, and you just play it like that, and then someone's like, oh, it's only 1 unit only now. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And my app, like, my book still says whatever. Or you're like, I've got screenshots that I took of the app, that my mate sent me from the app before, because I never bought it myself and he did, or something like that.
It's interesting, isn't it, in that we now have, certainly from AOS, We now have a design team whose entire background, like yourself, is in computer gaming and data and statistics, which is great from a game balance point of view. And I think we've talked before. I think AOS is in a fantastic balanced point of view. Really, there's the odd outlier, but majority wise, it's balanced. But there are a lot of people who play the hobby who play it because they want to avoid computer games.
Yeah,
they don't want to be online. Like I
touch grass.
I remember playing TTS during COVID, and I hated it because I was like, this is my experience of Warhammer. Like, I want to physically see someone across the table and get out my house and go and play somebody.
It's way more socially frowned upon to drink by yourself in your house playing computer games than it is out at a Warhammer tournament.
That sounds like first-hand experience there. But it is interesting, isn't it? Because there's an assumption then, I guess, if you come from a computer game world and you're very technology savvy, and obviously lots of stuff's done on YouTube now and streaming like what we're doing now, you have a natural assumption that everybody else is where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's natural for every human being, right? We all assume that we're normal and everybody else is majority-wise same as us, no matter how weird and wonderful we are. There are so many people that are not interested in chasing around online and looking for rules updates. They're not interested in what's the latest FAQ. They're not in. I have in a club up here near Leeds, and I have when the updates come out, it's almost like an eye roll going, not again. Do you know? I've got to check again.
I've got to change my army. Like, I bought these minis. Like, it's definitely part of the game. James Dean has made a comment, which we were talking about a little bit earlier, which was saying, like a Warhammer Plus subscription should give you access to all the rules and armies. And, that's something we talked about again, right? Which is where it does seem, I think everybody recognizes that, Games Workshop need to pay people to write the rules to their game and to make the minis. And so if maybe, the people aren't buying as many battle tomes anymore because they're out of date, that they're like, okay, we're gonna deliver you a better experience on the app and all that, but you have to pay for it, and then maybe paying for it on a per battle tome basis isn't as good. I'm gonna add that to my notes here, but better.
Yeah, I think we James has got a good point there. We did talk when we were doing the notes for the show, and maybe there's a like a halfway house, like most retailers will offer you a discount for either for perceived loyalty or for perceived return purchase, etc. So if we assume that GW between 40k and AOS do probably 4 battle tomes or 4 codices a year. No, actually 40k is way ahead of that this year, to be fair, I think, isn't it? But so will AOS probably with a new edition. But maybe at the start of the year they give you an option to do like a bulk buy, make it up, buy 4, get the 5th one free, but you pay for it all up front. So from a business point of view, they're getting the cash in early, which is obviously every business wants to do that. That's a massive bonus to them. And as a consumer, you're getting the chance. All right, you're taking a risk, aren't you? Like, for example, I know that barring a miracle, I will never play KO unless you or Luke tell me I have to at an event. But like, I will never play KO, so I don't want the KO battle tome, right? But I would take the punt on buying the 5 battle tome. I don't want to be seen
with the KO battle tome.
not that guy, yeah. But I would take the punt and buy the battle tomes, and know therefore that if KO is one of those battle tomes, I'm going to get a battle tome that I don't particularly want. But from a business point of view for GW, you're quids in, aren't you? Because then you've sold battle tomes that people wouldn't normally bought. So, and I guess to some degree you're also measuring off and going, it would be interesting. They probably don't have access to it, to be fair. But how many people buy a battle tome now?
It'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it?
The code, because if you're buying it for the code, and selling anything online is significantly cheaper than selling it in the flesh, right? So why would you want to distribute to stores? Why would you want to print books? Why would you if and I don't say we're right, but if even 50% of people only buy the tome for the code, why not just have an electronic?
Well, in theory, that's good. In theory, if someone just buys the book for the code, that is sort of good for GW. That's a rather cynical take that I don't love, though. But I think really it just touches on the fact that it is difficult to balance those things. I'm just catching up a little bit on chat here. So Solteris says he's kind of tired of purchasing the paper books over and over again. Yeah, so he can just get the code to have the rules online. Yeah, he wants to buy a digital pack for less than the book. That's a little like what you're saying. Martin saying, release the updates to a scroll as a whole page to print out and stick in the book. Yeah, so something like that. Like, I remember that, when they came out with that foldable GHB in the last GHB, if they did have some way of like, making you a paper book that then you could be like, it has a way to update it. I mean, I guess you could do that yourself, but
you do it? I mean, again,
I
their
wouldn't do it
balance.
now. But it would
Well,
at least be something. It would make your books a little bit less nice.
their argument, yeah, that would be their argument, right?
Yeah.
Their argument is always is always best in class, right? You come to GW because it's the best in class, but from a practicality point of view, the most useful way to do the most useful way to do it. Do you remember when you were a kid and you used to collect like, I don't know if you did, well, we did, collect like they had like magazine runs and stuff, and you'd get the folder to put the magazines in,
Sure.
and almost just having like an AOS ring binder, and actually Battle Tome is a set of documents that go in the ring binder, right?
Yeah.
So every war scroll is just a page, and then you, like you say, you can print, you can either print it out or, yeah, exactly, right.
I think.
But, I mean, yeah, I've got shelves and shelves of Battle Tomes that I bought for just the lore. In reality, I bought them for the code, but
It's
yeah, they
hard,
do pile
isn't
up.
it? So yeah, Solterra says he's bought. Yeah, he doesn't like the updates for people who only use the books, and he's bought 3 Lumineth books. Yeah, and they're just kind of useless now.
Yeah, that must have been frustrating 12 months.
Yeah, like for sure. And James Dean says we could just roll a dice and highest roll wins the game, and then we can spend the rest of the time drinking. Okay, that's the most obvious solution. So we obviously got to talk about other ones. But no, it's like it is just an interesting problem, I think, for Games Workshop, because I'm sure a big part of it is probably just that like there was a time, presumably, when they probably sold a lot of books. Again, when the internet was less big and more people were into it as a hobby, not as a tea sport. And they just be like, right, we write the book, we print out the book, and we sell a bunch of them, right? We don't like, we sell all the books, people buy them, now the books are extremely depreciated because it's like you're not, my mate when we started playing fantasy, he had his Skaven Battle Tome, which was from 5th edition, and we were playing in 8th edition, so it was just the same book, and those were the rules. The community added like comp and stuff like that, but the reality is the rules were just good for 3 years, or longer. I don't even know how long those editions took. But obviously the flip side of that is that the book is not extremely balanced and you need comp. So, now Games Workshop are sort of trying to figure out a way. Presumably they don't want to just stop making books because a lot of people like them, and they presumably make a reasonable amount of money for Games Workshop. But at the same time, they want to update the game loads more. So it's like how I don't think there is one obvious solution.
I think some of it with for Games Workshop sometimes is they're victims of their own desired perception, right? So they are the market leader of wargaming, right? People, you can like it, love it, hate it, whatever. They are what they are, and they're on the stock exchange, so they have an expectation of presenting a corporate outlook, because that's what every corporation would do, right? You wouldn't expect to walk into Asda and find Mickey Mouse running it, would you? Like, you're going to expect a proper corporate thing, but so they're trying to pitch that. But when you actually speak to people, colleagues in Warhammer world, and I don't mean the store colleagues, I mean the colleagues when they come out to like the open days and stuff like that, take you through the fact that it's a very different Games Workshop than it was 6-7 years ago. So back to when you point, like, when they unleash lawyers on everybody for the slightest thing, and they shut everything down, and they kind of came away from that because they realised that obviously growing the IP is where they're going to grow their revenue in the long term, right? It's a bit like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Before, you're only going to grow IP if people have access to as much of it as possible. But they're certainly more of a phase of they're more open to trying anything they've ever been as a company, right? But they don't want to produce that perception, because they don't want to give the perception that they're learning by doing. Because they're a corporate outfit. I mean, from me, my day job, I do deal with big retailers and stuff like that, and I'll tell you now, they all learn by doing. Like, none of them have a clue when you talk to them. But what they do, but that's not the perception people have. And I think if they could strike that balance, because fundamentally you're right, they're going through a massive period of change where technology is becoming ever increasing, and yet their whole pitch is play our game because it's not technology, right?
Yeah, go play it real life,
And it ties into what a lot of people are worried about, which is too much screen time. It ties into what a lot of parents are worried about, which is my kids play too much screen time. Oh, look, you can do this. And suddenly you're doing a tactile hobby with your mates, that you're getting out of your dark bedroom and you go in and playing with your friends, and therefore that's a better hobby. So they've got a really good USP from that perspective. But then, as you say, to your point, how do you tie that in with the moving technology of balance? You know, we all, like I say, we don't want a book that is, there's nothing worse in the old days, was there, than you waited 3-4 years, you got your shiny new tome, within 10 minutes you realise you weren't going to be competitive, and you're like, oh well, I'll just put that back on the shelf, for 3 years and go back to playing something different. It was awful.
Yeah, so, no, I mean that's the flip side of it, isn't it? So James Dean says, I think they've seen it work in 40k. Don't recognize there's a huge difference in player base. So that's an interesting point. It feels like they really play testing it. I'll see if it applies the same way. Okay. Oh, without seeing if it's same. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. 40k is different and much bigger as well, so that's interesting. And Martin says,
interesting on that point. Before we move on, interesting on that point. One thing that it will be an interesting test is, you certainly from my own experience, you tend to find the 40k player base is younger.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a reason that 40k is so, and I get it's a bigger game anyway, but it's so much more popular online. Like if you speak to content creators, we've had the discussion, haven't we? Like 40k gets so many more hits than Age of Sigmar because there are far more people out there looking for it.
It's because the app scrolls have always been private. That's what gets the views.
We should see a boost soon for AOS then. Sorry. Anyway.
No. Yeah. No, I was just so. And Martin also says, oh yeah, he's saying about comp as well, improving the game but making it harder for casuals, which is a similar thing. It's actually, I mean, this I think is a separate video that I do want to do sometime about how there is a conflict of interest actually in just the balancing of the game. It's a thing, balance is a good servant and a poor master as far as games go, where it's like you want to use balance as a tool to make your game more fun, but it's, in Age of Sigmar, I think we've spent a long time like pursuing balance in some ways to its own, just for its own sake. Now I know Luke absolutely loves it. He's like, the game's in the best place it's ever been of all time because it's really balanced and really good, and he's a really competitive player, and that's cool. Like, I mean, and I still have fun playing Warhammer because I love the minis and the social scene. But at the same time, we've talked about it. You lose some of the more fun, some of the more out there abilities, and in general, there is just these two conflicting forces of like the game could be on the one hand like chess, completely balanced, more or less, but like also very static. There's not a lot of extremely exciting things happening. And on the other side, it could be like, fantasy was like uncomped fantasy, where you just be like, one army is way, way better than the other army. So like it's not even fun.
If you go down the route of all balance, and the problem is you lose people, right? So I witnessed, I was involved in a discussion last week, in fact, in as I said, a local gaming club, where there was a big debate between whether people wanted to play boarding actions, which is the new 40k small thing through corridors, or whether people wanted to play kill team. And the majority of people came down the side of boarding actions, and one of the biggest drivers was, apparently, I don't play either, but apparently is that kill team is a fixed team. You get your team, and that's your team. And boarding actions is you get 500 points and you build an army list to 500 points. And one of the big drivers was people wanted to build and put their own flavour on their army list. Whereas kill team, which you would argue is perfectly balanced because all the kill teams are pre-designed, puts people off because it's pre-designed. I have no control of my army. Like,
that's a huge part, I think, of Warhammer in general. Is you're not like, I'm gonna play, not to flame Marvis Croesus Protocol, which I don't know how it works, but. As an example, you're like, I'm not just playing the Hulk. I'm pretty sure you probably build your own list in that game anyway. Sorry to everyone who plays Marvel Crisis Protocol. But you're like, I'm not going to just play the Hulk. I'm going to play, Flesh Eater Courts, but I'm going to play my own version. If I want, I can play 10 zombie dragons. That's the cool thing about this, and you're like, that's my list. And maybe you find out it's terrible and never play it again. But like, you had the opportunity. You're not just, playing chess. Right, you're not just playing either, this set thing. So I definitely think that's part of it. And again, puts pressure on the system. So chat's still popping off. I love it. Luminous, this edition completely sucked compared to the lore that they spent the last year building. They're still competitive, but they've been nerdered compared to their lore. That's always a hard thing I've found about, like, it's sort of almost a Space Marine problem and stuff like that, where you're like, you read the lore for your, like, faction or something like that, and you're like, why, like Archeon, you're like, he has 6 attacks and he misses all of them. You're like, that shouldn't be possible. It's one of the things that drove me to play stuff like Gits and stuff like that, where I'm like, if they do well, I'm like, nice, that's awesome because they're crazy. And if they do badly, I'm like, that's lore appropriate, So yeah, I definitely know that. Games Workshop doesn't want to hear anything. They so much time building the stories around their IP to hear they've gutted an army according to its lore for balance. Yeah, well, exactly. So that is the two. You know, if it would be awesome in some ways if you went to the lore and you were like, Teclis is 2,500 points and you can't cast any magic and he just destroys everyone immediately. You'd be like, good, like that's appropriate. You know, Nagash, you can't kill him. He resurrects himself and his whole army every time they die. You'd be like, yes, great, lore appropriate. But then you'd also be like, you obviously can't play him at 2,000 points. So those are just two facts that are like, you know, definitely that are always going to pressure against each other.
We had there was a competition up here in the Yorkshire area 6 months ago, something, I think, and they banned all god level heroes because they were just like, they shouldn't be on the table, they shouldn't be fighting. Play your own army, and get on with it. And it is hard, isn't it? Like you say, in the lore, you're building these things up to be gods. Well, it's just it's the same fine line as when they brought Primarchs into 40k, right? Well, you built these things up as they can never die. And now this guy dies every week. Like,
you're like, my one mate has killed Guilliman like 80 times in the worst possible circumstances, and that it is tough. It is tough, and I think also, for me personally, I'm like, often what makes these things cool, especially because it's just a tabletop game. It's not a, you know, like a movie cinematic universe that's been developed by professionals. Is you're like, some of it's just the mystery. You know, you're like Nagash is so strong. But what's he, you know, they don't really tell you how. They're not like he hits on threes, you know? They're like, no, he's so strong. And you're like, I bet he hits on ones. And then he comes out, obviously he's not allowed to hit on ones. And you're like, he's definitely less powerful than the made up version I had. And as you say, it's like, I've seen him die to stabas. You're like, is that lore appropriate? I don't know. But it's definitely, again, it's a make. And James Dean says the lore is always going to outweigh the gameplay. And it's like, it's just, there's always going to be, you know, some people are going to be like, I really want, like, for me, the balance of the game, even, the rules are only there so that I can really engage with this lore universe that I love. And there's other people who are going to be like, I wouldn't care if we just played with labeled pieces of paper, or, well, labeled base sizes, because that's important, and we would just play a competitive game, and that's what I really love. And it's like, again, Games Workshop, when they are designing the game, have got to be like, I want both of these people to keep enjoying it, even though they want things that cannot coexist, you know, completely in harmony.
It's interesting how, I wonder how that, and I don't play the game
on ones. Sorry, Salters.
Yes, I wonder how people who play Middle Earth strategy battle game feel about it. You know, where you've actually got Aragorn is written in a certain way. We've all seen the movies. He trashes everybody. And obviously you watch Aragorn die sometimes on Middle Earth strategy battle games. So you know, and they're far more lore driven than we are.
No,
if I say that, to be fair, it's all lore, isn't it? But I think the best way to view lore is a bit like propaganda, right? You've got to realise that the Gloomspite Git's battle tome is written by a Gloomspite Git trying to make out the goblins are the greatest thing since sliced bread. The Elven lore is written by an elf somewhere. Yeah, my mates are the best, you know. And kind of, if you view it that way, it's a little bit more. A little bit more sustainable, but it's difficult to balance, isn't it? Because you make out something absolutely undefeatable, and then you put that on the table and it just winds everybody up. So
for me,
winds everybody else up.
I think at least in for that, I've always managed to retrospect it a little bit. I'm like, Nagash didn't actually get killed by the stabber. You know, I'm like, he just spent so long killing 5 million grots that he couldn't get whatever we're saying this objective what it actually was, you know. And so it's like Nagash lost, you know. Obviously he still killed all the Gits and turned Skragrott into dust or whatever. Well, Skragrott probably escaped, but turned someone else into dust, and you're like, that all did happen. It's just he needed to claim this objective in a certain amount of time to progress his grand strategy, and he was slowed down too much by the Gits, so it like is a Gits victory. But at the time,
this why you always get so preoccupied in the bar after a round trying to work out this story in your head?
I'm like, get me head of propaganda on the phone immediately. But no. Oh yeah. So James Jean says Middle Earth is the best rule set in the entire GW game set. I've never heard anything bad about it. I think also in some ways when games are smaller, they tend to have a more homogenous like gamer group. So like if everyone's like, oh, the rule set's really good and it has the right level of lore balance, it's small. If it's a bit smaller, it can maintain that as a culture. And, you know, but it's like as the game gets bigger and there's more diverse like sets of opinions on what's what's good. That like, and like we've seen with Age of Sigmar, like it's definitely progressed from like when Age of Sigmar 1 came out with no points and with like joke rules in the game and stuff like that. It was like, look, no one really plays fantasy anymore, so we're just gonna let you do what you want. But over time, as people have taken it more seriously, they've been like, right, well, we're gonna get rid of a lot of the fun rules, not the fun rules, but the for fun rules, in exchange for making the game more balanced. So it's definitely interesting. Although we've also definitely wandered miles off topic. Although it is very fun to talk about
most of our discussion.
Yeah, exactly. At least now it's being recorded, so someone else can be like, "Wait, these guys are idiots." Yeah, no. So let's talk a little bit more about these Warscrolls. So I think for my personal experience, one of the things is like I do not play a lot of tournaments for starters, and when I do, I tend to do something like I use an old army I already have, or I borrow an army. And I would like, when I played the Archeon list, and Luke was like, play Archeon. It's relatively easy to play because 980 points of your army or whatever is in one model, and so enjoy that, and you have the models, cool. But I'm like, I'm not going to spend £35 on the Slaves to Darkness Battle Tome to play that list, and then also it didn't exist. But like by the time I got to the tournament, it had already been nerfed out of existence. So it's like, if I really wanted to play that one list, and then I'd be like, right, I bought the battle tome and now it's useless. But if I hadn't had the rules on the app, I would not have been able to play it either, for the same reason, which is that like I don't know what Fell Riders hit on off the top of my head. I mean, I do now, but I didn't at the time. And so and also when my opponents would say like, are you sure that's your rules? I'd be like, no, like let's definitely, I'll definitely look it up for you because you might be right. And so I think that's really important, even in a competitive way for me, is I want to make sure that I'm not cheating my opponent. But also, I think, again, for me personally, what it would make me do is just like always play some shit list that I could keep playing for a long time, really. Like, I'd just be like, I still have my goblins, and I'll just play them because at least, I don't have to like accidentally trick my opponent by playing the wrong rules or something like that. And again, from the collecting side as well, I'm definitely I'd be like, I'd want to scroll through the rules and be like, oh, okay, these guys have ASF or something, and I'd be like, and I'd be like, oh wait, this hero, he can buff this. Okay, maybe I'm gonna build a list around that hero. Whereas now I'm like, okay, if I like the models, that's cool, but it's not gonna get me over the hump of buying the army, because like with the Brood Terror, right, I'd be like, oh, this Brood Terror is like a sick army, a sick model. And
what would work, and we haven't touched on this before, but it's that's why we're musing, right? It's trying to entertain people. Yeah. There are 24 races in Age of Sigmar, right? So what if, as a Warhammer Plus package, you could buy a certain number of battle tomes, not a specific battle tome?
Oh, like battle tome vouchers.
So I want to buy 5 battle tomes, right? So on my app, at any point in time, I can have 5 battle tomes unlocked. And if I close one down, I get one of my tokens back. So I could go, right, I'm putting goblins back on the shelf. So turn off my Gloomspite, get one switch on my head. And I get you could switch it off. Well, you could do it 2 ways. You could let people just switch on and off quickly, because that would tie into what we've talked about, but you only got a certain number open. But you've paid full whack for those, so you still paid your 5 battle tomes, what, 150 quid, well, close to 200, isn't it? But you can have 5 unlocked on your app at any one time. Or even put some dead time on there. So once you switch one off, you can only switch another one on in a week's time, to stop everyone just having access to everything all the time, depending on what GW want to do. Because the danger I guess you run now is you're encouraging a Netflix type thing, right? Well, like if you get together as a gaming club, you just buy one book and you go, right, you're taking
PDF.
Sign out. Well, or even just if you're teching on this weekend, if you sign out of your app on Friday night, here's my login. Log in as me. I've got the Slaves app. I've got the Slaves book. Log out for the weekend. At the end of the weekend, log out, and it's like Netflix. You sign different people in. You get access to everything.
Realistically, like for me, like it again, as someone who doesn't play a lot, like it would just mean I would just never use official Games Workshop rules. Realistically, like I'll just be like, oh yeah, like my mate has this or whatever, because I'm like, I don't play the same army for long enough for it to be worth it. So like, and it just means it's going to lower mine and my opponent's tournament experience by X%. Chat is saying, James Dean saying, I think there's a tough balance to find the meta before you bring out an update. Yeah. I mean, it's also really hard. Again, when you play League of Legends, you know, you're like, there's 10,000 games an hour or whatever played of League of Legends. So when you're like, you know, this champion is way too strong, you're like, yeah, they are, right? Whereas in Warhammer, when you're like, it's been 3 months, you're like, this army is too strong. It's probably right, but to actually gauge how too strong it is really hard. Because I remember, like, one of the things when I got into Warhammer stats was for Slanesh. So way back when Slanesh was really, really strong in 2nd edition, they had, you know, whatever win rate they had, and then their win rate when the nerfs got announced. So when Games Workshop came out in like their article or whatever, and were like, we are going to be addressing Slanesh in December, their win rate dropped by like 15%, because it was just a bunch of the good players who'd been winning a lot with them just stopped playing them. And it was like, for people who kept playing them, their win rate maintained the same, obviously, because they hadn't been changed yet. But it was like, there's a lot of, you know, these lensing effects, because it's a very low sample size game. You know, and you're like, how many people, when Slanesh, or, you know, when Nighthaunt are a problem right now, it's like, well, how many people are playing Nighthaunt just because it is the best army in the game? And what is their normal win rate? Okay, you know, how's it affecting them? All that stuff. So it makes it very difficult to balance that stuff. Solterra says a few of those vouchers should come free with your Warhammer Plus subscription. So yeah, that could be it. Could be like, if you're subscribed to Warhammer Plus, you can always have one, kind of like even if you have the app for free, you can have one list that you've built. You know, you could imagine it could be like, yeah, you're allowed to have one battle tome unlocked, you know, and you can't change it more than once a week or whatever. But like, they could say, yeah, your Warhammer Plus includes one battle tome for whatever army you're playing at the time, so that you can read it and you can show your opponents it. Obviously, again, it's going to be like hard for your opponents, and I think maybe what we'll touch, there's a message here from Zek Judd, but after that we'll touch on what it means for like really competitive players like at Worlds and Six Nations. But so Zek says, as a new player interested in Skaven, I have no idea where to start or what to buy without getting a book first. Yeah, exactly. And that, as you were saying before, Phil, that's a big expenditure if you're then going to be like, nah, it's not for me. You know, if you're like, I love the Brood Terror, let me get the book.
I mean, our only solution we can give you for that is look at our Hot or Not video.
Yeah. You can watch our review of Skaven and then just do the opposite of everything I said.
Don't listen to us. But have a look at it. It'll tell you what you need to know.
But yeah, so I think now
it is hard.
There is then people worked out how to bear them by the time. Oh, that's also interesting. James Dean talking about when they made those priority targets where they were like, killing a Mega Guardian gave you 1 extra point. So I actually think this is a really interesting, again, off topic, but a really interesting thing, which is like the meta balancing mechanisms, where you would say something like, right, when we announce our meta watch thing, instead of necessarily buffing or nerfing the armies and making you change your models, we'll say, you know, all the armies in the bottom half get a triumph at the start of the game. You know, you get +1 to hit once per game or something like that. I think that stuff could be really interesting. I know GW obviously know about it, and they presumably don't like it or don't see it working optimally now. But yeah, so I think the next question is for competitive players. So let's say you are going to, you know, Six Nations is the end of this month. So if you're going to Six Nations, is it now just like every player going to Six Nations has to buy the Skaven book? You know, and there's only one out at the moment. You know, with next Six Nations, are they really going to be like, I mean, the real answer is probably your captain's going to buy the books, screenshot them all, build them into a PDF, and send them to you. And it's going to be way worse experience than using the app. But I was interested to see what you think about that, Phil.
And it'll be really sad if that. I mean, I do think it will happen. I know we've both been just slightly off topic, so a slight deviation to answer the question, but because I know we've both been dabbling in having a look at 40k. And I played my first game last week, and the lad I was playing, because he didn't want to go and buy the book, he just started Space Marine Army, had gone on Reddit or some forum like that and printed off all his rules. And I'm like, well, are they actually the rules, or are they just what some randoms put on Reddit? I personally use Reddit ever. So I don't know if it's like Wikipedia where anybody can just make up anything and just post it, and therefore you go, oh, these are my rules. And you go, are they your rules or not? I don't know. but as an overall experience, it just makes
It was a lot
that
worse.
much worse, right? Because what I do think is positive about both the 40k app and the AOS app now is the I can't remember what it's called on the AOS app. One second, what's it called on the AOS app where you can see all your rules, can't you?
Yeah.
On the one place. What do we call it?
Oh yeah, I forget what it's called. Like
Realm Gate.
uh-huh.
The Realm Gate link, where it's got all your enhancements, all your rules, all the Warscrolls just for your 2,000 points there in one place, easy to get to, and it makes the game so easy. Now, as I say, for really interesting last week because, as I say, I've got the Tyranny book and I've got the 40k app, so I was able to open up whatever their version of Realm Gate is and had everything there in one place. And meanwhile, my opponent is flicking through 6 pages of printed out sheets from Reddit trying to find his rules, and he's like, it was a real pain for him. So they've put a lot of time and effort into making the app user friendly, and I know there's been again trial and error on the app, and people have been grumbled about it. Overall, now I think it's in a reasonably good place. Then at the same time as making it as good as it's ever been, you then put a big blocker in people's way of going, well, you can't have it, And I just think it's
tough.
something that they could probably do.
Okay, wait, I figured it out. Okay, you ready? Solved. GW, tune in now. What you do is you give TOs like a bunch of temporary codes. So when you sign up to a tournament, everybody at your event gets a code that works from Friday night to Monday morning that unlocks all of the battle tomes. And
do you know what? That's genius.
And then
that's genius.
And that's it. And then you go away. And then you hope people don't sign up as a fake TO being like, I'm running an event from Thursday night to but yeah, like,
I'm running a 364-day campaign. Sign me up.
It's a narrative Stormcast versus Skaven campaign. But I mean that it sounds annoying for TOs, and presumably for GW. But
annoying for players, right? Like
I mean you'd have to the
way you do it. You have to go and activate every single code, don't you? On your
well, I was thinking that there's just one. It's just like it pops up. Ideally, it pops up a notification saying yes, you've been registered as attending Phil's Meta Breakers tournament. Is this you? And you click yes, and it's like cool. You will have access to all the rules until Sunday at 5 after round 5. And it's like cool.
It's genius though, because to be fair to GW, for ease of play, if you played a lot of events, no one's going to moan if the ticket costs £5 more and they put that on.
Yeah.
Well, people might because people have everything, right? But you could easily get away with tagging £5 on a ticket, and GW making, if you think 100-player event, that's an extra 500 quid for G. I mean, small pennies make pounds and stuff, but if they wanted to go that way, but
I mean, you wouldn't again, there's it could be like yes, as long as you're a Warhammer Plus person, you get your free key for the weekend, or again, you don't even need to make it go through TOs. You could be like, look, if you sign up to Warhammer Plus, you get 10 event tickets, and you can redeem an event ticket at any time. Doesn't even need to really be for an event, and for 48 hours, you can
access to everything.
You get access to everything, and you say if you want, you can use that for 48 hours before you go play Skaven. For Zek, if you're like, I want to do Skaven, you're like, I'm going to spend one of my tickets to spend 48 hours reading all the Skaven rules and seeing what's what. Again, someone will probably just screenshot them all into a PDF, and that's GW's problem rather than our problem. If there was
you've already got people doing that, right?
Yes,
so
of course,
you've already got people doing that. So we say it's GW's, but it's already GW's problem.
Yeah, that's sort of
So I mean, because even to where you were talking that, I mean, when you're on Amazon Prime or you're on Sky Cinema. If you want the latest movie, you can rent it, can't you? So even having a, you can log onto your Warhammer Plus, pay £2, and you can rent a battle tome for 3 days. You know what I mean? People would do it. To Zach's point, you might go, I fancy playing Skaven. Yeah, £2. I've unlocked everything. Quick, read it all. If you want a screenshot, whatever, but read it all. Am I getting a feel for this race? Because I'm getting a feel for it. You know what? I'll just buy the battle tome because I know I want to give it a go.
Like now I've seen it, I want to try it. Yeah, I mean, I think Spotify or Netflix or someone had the reasonably good quote, which was about like the only way you stop piracy, right, is by offering a better service than the pirates, right? And so that's why Spotify and stuff like that did essentially kill like downloading Linkin Park _full album _MP3 from wherever it was.
But GW have got the platform to do that.
Yeah.
The problem is to spend money on Spotify was like a couple of quid, wasn't it? Like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't think so. Therefore, it's not it's not something you even consider because it's such a low price.
For
The
all the
trouble is
music.
when you're talking about a battle tome
Yeah.
for 40 quid,
Yeah.
it is a big price. So you're not
Yeah, yeah.
wanting low
Agreed.
GW, and I do think GW's platform is a lot better than Reddit or a. We talked about this the other day around the Skaven notes we had, isn't it? Is that
Yeah.
it's just easier on the app to flick through the app.
Absolutely. I love the app. Yeah, the app's good.
So they've done the platform. The platform, as I say, it's in a better place than it's ever been for all the trial and error they put into it. And what they now need just need to tinker with how we then access.
Yeah. I mean,
information they've got behind
I
it.
think what's sort of important to realize is at the end of the day, us and Games Workshop kind of have the same goals, right? I mean, obviously we want more stuff for free. They want more money, but like they want you to be an active participant in their ecosystem, right? So ideally they'd get all the people who are willing to pay for books to buy them, and all the people who want them for free would get them for free. But there's no way to distinguish between that, so they have to have a universal rule. So hopefully over time they will figure out a bit more like, okay, well actually, your subscription gets you this or this or this. I think probably the current setup of like you have to pay £35 for each battle tome.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to buy them one at a time, and then and you can't see the rules at a tournament. Otherwise, it's probably not great and not optimal. But again, GW are moving fast with all this stuff, right? Like there aren't a lot of problems that Warhammer has had that have existed for a consistently long amount of time. So I will extend them a reasonable amount of faith there.
It'd be interesting to see if they and again the trouble with them trying things is we're a very I say we, it's the same also anybody who likes any IP, right? You're very impatient because we're all very passionate about the IP. Yeah. It's your point. I say we all want the same thing in terms of we all want more people playing, right? We'd all love everybody to play Warhammer so that we could literally ring up anybody and go, "Do you want a game of Warhammer?" and off you go. So we all want more people playing. I think that the issue they have is that whenever they try anything, if they do drop the ball, the feedback is so negative and so immediate and so loud, it puts them off track. Because I would say, well, you know what, the next battle tome, well, Stormcast already done it, but when they do slaves, if I was GW, I go, do you know what, we're going to offer just the electronic code, and what we're going to do is we're only going to order 25% of the volume of books that we would normally order. But what will happen is if they get it wrong, we'll all go mental and go, I can't get hold of a slaves book.
Yeah. Why have GW released a new army but without as many books? Like they're supposed to be this.
Actually, it would be a good acid test, wouldn't it? Going, right, we're going to drop the number of books available and we're going to put these electronic codes. And if they sell out in like 2 minutes, you go, right, actually in future, do you know what we're going to do? We make more money selling electronic codes than we do shipping books from China. So we'll do more electronic books.
I think we should get all the models for free through the app as well. That's my take. GW, please stop watching before this point.
You've got enough to pay.
Yeah, that's true. That's certainly true. But yeah, I mean, I think that's largely speaking everything we want. At least I thought about covering for the topic. I don't know if you had any stuff you wanted to bring up, Phil.
It's interesting chatting through it, and hopefully, the folks at home have found it interesting, and the chat certainly seems to be lively because I think, it's a constant topic at the moment of lots of different chats that I'm in of people adapting or talking about adapting to what they're going to do. So I think it'll be interesting to see which way they go. I imagine no one from GW is watching this stream, but if they did and stuck with it, then they've given you some ideas. But it is, isn't it? So if you're going to go down a route of embracing the technology which they have with the app, and I think you talked about when we did our pre-show around looking at what do computer games do around DLC, what do people do around unlocking, and I know they're not skipping around looking at unlocking skins and unlocking this and unlocking that. How do you go about doing that, and how do you they embed it more? As I say, they're in a battle at the minute, aren't they, of trying to embrace technology, but with a format and a product that doesn't really want to be technologically based.
Absolutely,
there's so many. We could go on and on about technological innovations in gaming, but one I saw the other day, and I'm so used to, is the VR goggles now that will show you on the table what the 6-inch. And part of me goes, you know what? Amazing, like the technology there, we want to move forward, and part of me goes, I'm horrified because I don't want technology in this hobby because I play it to get away from technology. So I mean, it's an interesting one in itself, isn't it? And that the apps so useful.
Yeah.
I'm always very aware with the app that can make you it can make you antisocial because you can spend too much time on like
Yeah.
the is it the tabletop battle app that tracks
Oh
the
yeah,
score?
like you're taking stuff
And
off and
I'm always very aware that when I've got that open and I've got the GW app open, you know, then and I'm spend half my time looking at my phone, and I'm like, I
yeah.
don't want to look at my phone because I'm here to play Bob or Fred or whoever
Yeah,
I'm playing
for sure.
that
I
day.
mean,
And
I think again, it's those two spectrums, right? For me, often what I wish Warhammer was almost, I'd buy my models, I'd build them, I'd paint them, I'd bring them to an event, I'd set them down on the table, and then I would not interact with them. Some at the end of the game, I'd watch them, you know, and at the end of the game, they'd be like, "Well, you won 3 of your games and you lost 2," and I'd be like, "Sick," and I'd be watching them with my opponent, and we'd be like, "Go get him" or whatever. But like, and then on the
I've been
flip
watching
side,
too much Star Wars.
yeah, exactly. Well, just like that. And then on the other side is people who's like, I wish, you know, that there weren't any dice involved, really, so that I could really express myself as like a skillful war gamer and a strategic mastermind. And again, like the hobby encompasses all those people. And I think often even an individual might be like sometimes, you know, if my opponent's just made a 9-inch charge after deep striking, I wish there were no dice in the game. But if, you know, if I've made it, then I'm a fun and narrative gamer. You know, that's the
I
difference.
think there's a, you know, and we'll probably preview now for the people. There's probably a show in this in itself, isn't there? For those who've enjoyed this rambling, this is very much like a lot of our ramblings, isn't it? But because I would argue, well, you take the dice away, you're making it less of a war game.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I mean by that is obviously if you look back through the annals of history, how many times has the
Yeah.
army that should have won not won
Yeah.
because you know someone tied their shoelace at the wrong time and suddenly someone forgot to attack and you know anything can happen, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that element of chance is what I think sets it apart from chess. But
And it makes it changes, also changes it, activates different centers in your brain, right? Like, you know, in tic-tac-toe is obviously completely balanced, but is a solved game. There's an optimal move at any point, whereas, you know, it becomes a lot more complicated when you're like, well, this might be the best play 70% of the time, but the payoff is maybe smaller than this, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, different conversation for a different time. But
welcome to our world, folks.
Just gonna have a 24-hour stream running here. But yeah. So that's all from me. Again, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. It's really great having people in the chat. You can tell people are pretty passionate about this. You know, Solteris, I hope you never get Lumineth buffs, sadly, because I hate that army. But I hope you switch to an army I like, and then you get the buffs you deserve. So I'll put that out there. But yeah, remember to follow the channel, like and subscribe, and all that good stuff. And you can hop over on the Discord where we'll be posting this video and every time we go live. And yeah, thanks to our patrons as well who have been supporting us all through this and, you know, make all this stuff possible. But yeah, otherwise, that's a goodbye from me.
That's goodbye from me, folks. Thanks for listening.